Hi, everyone. It's Larry Johnson, founder of the Eight Principles, another edition of Eight Principles Voices. And I am particularly excited today because I have before me an opportunity to have a conversation with Tim Cudsey, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Multiple Sclerosis Society of America. Is that correct, Tim?
Just National Multiple Sclerosis Society.
Okay. All right. And he has the interesting background. I've already looked, we've talked. We're going to talk about how he got started as an undergraduate in biology. We're going to go all the way through his education, but then all of his jobs, all along the same thing. So then I said, well, so Tim, is some of your family a victim of this? No, no. It's just something that I grew interested in. And he's going to show us this picture that's on his wall that shows where he got it. And then we're also going to talk about some great ideas he has about moving forward and how he's going to really take on a challenge of, I presume, if not containing this disease, solving it, curing it. So, without further ado, welcome, Tim.
It's great to be with you, Larry, and your audience.
Thank you, thank you. Now, you're I'm speaking to you today. I'm in Boise, but you're in Albany, New York today.
That is where I am today, coming to you from my home office, or my
Okay.
TV studio, as my family would like to call it, because of the cameras and the lights in it.
um, so you have snow on the ground there?
We do have some snow on the ground, more coming. It's a
Okay.
balmy 22 degrees here.
Okay. All right. Well, Boise has no snow. Our snow
Oh.
is always in the mountains.
Mm.
You can drive about an hour and get all kinds of snow. But one thing I like about living here is we don't get much. It's what's known as the high desert. But I'll
I
take it.
see. Yeah.
Anyway, well, after living in Western New York for a while, I think I deserve it, quite frankly. I mean,
No lake effect snow here in Albany or where you are, which is
mhm.
something I don't miss either from my time in Western New York.
I learned something once. I'm always a keeper of trivia. There are only three places in the world that have lake effect snow:
Oh, oh, interesting.
Western New York,
Okay,
Western Michigan,
makes
and
sense.
I forget, but there's a place in Japan
Oh,
where they have lake. So there are only three places in the world that experience lake effect snow. There you go.
that is there. That I learned something new today as well.
Yeah, I always try to keep learning, right?
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
so then let's go back and how long have you been? You're a relatively new CEO.
So actually, today would be about 6 months when we're recording this on January 15th. So about 6 months since I started as CEO at the MS Society. I've been with the organization about 24 years now, after a career in research.
You're becoming more of a rarity, what I call a company man. Um, when I guess my first corporate job was working for Westinghouse, and there were corporate lifers.
Hmm.
One of the things that distinguished Westinghouse from its chief competitor, General Electric, was at that time you sort of worked your way up in Westinghouse.
Hmm.
They didn't go raiding for their top talent some other place, and you don't see that much anymore. Uh,
You don't, it's interesting, and I'll be the first to say I didn't imagine or set out to, have a 20 plus year career with the MS Society. I'd been a researcher doing multiple sclerosis research, and I know we can get into that later about what got me there. But I was working in a university doing research, and had an interest in moving into the nonprofit sector, particularly the organizations that funded research like of the kind that I did. And the MS Society, put an ad back in the day in one of the scientific magazines. I applied for it, and I took the job figuring that, well, if it doesn't work out, I can always go back to the lab. And well, that was 24 years ago. And the MS Society for me has just been an incredible journey. I've had a lot, as you know, a number of different roles along the way, and that's what's kept me here, and kept me embedded in the mission. And it's certainly something that, as I think about my role as CEO, just the importance of creating space and opportunities for the individuals that we lead and are in our care to grow and develop as leaders themselves. There's incredible potential. Oftentimes, leaders just need to be given the opportunity to show what incredible potential they have.
okay, all right. So, would you describe the society? Is emphasis primarily research, primarily service, a combination?
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe I can reel back our origin story. So we were started in 1946, actually, by a woman named Sylvia Lowry, whose brother was diagnosed with MS back in the early 1940s. And perhaps for your audience, I'm talking about the disease multiple sclerosis. It's a disease of the brain and the spinal cord. And basically, what it does is it disrupts the flow of information from the brain to the rest of the body, so that when we move our hands, talk, walk, all of those natural functions get disrupted. Her brother had been diagnosed with this disease, been given basically, a grim prognosis. The doctors told him to go home, get your affairs in order. There's nothing that can be done for you. And Sylvia didn't take that well, and she basically said, "Well, I'm going to try to do something about this," and put an 11-word classified ad in the New York Times that basically asked, the question, "Multiple sclerosis. Will anyone recovered from it please contact patient?" That 11-word ad, which, back in the day, the classified ads of the New York Times would be the Instagram of today.
Yes.
And it very much the social media of the time. 50 people wrote back to her. They gathered together at the New York Academy of Medicine and started working together, created an organization a year later. And then a year after that, had raised $1 million. Now, this is in 1946. So
Oh,
imagine, it was right
yes.
after World War II. So raised, in today's dollars, a lot of money,
More like
and started
50.
more like 50 million, exactly, a lot of money, and started funding research. And we have been doing that ever since. And so our organization, we are, as you say, focused on science to find a cure for the disease, but also focused on empowering people to live with MS while we strive to find a cure. And the good news is, over almost 80-year period, if a person is diagnosed with MS today, the world is different. There's treatments, there's quicker diagnosis, there's the prospect of living a full life, and it is a chronic disease, so people live with the disease, but it's a disease now with multiple treatment options and better ones coming along. And as a nonprofit organization, we're very proud of the fact that we've created space and community for people to connect, but also people to get the information they need while we fund the research to find a cure.
I'm just thinking about your origin story, and it so closely parallels the counsel I give a principal's clients or other people who are interested. Think about what this lady did. First of all, she had personal experience and she had passion. She reached out pretty much anonymously. Hey, just she threw her bread on the water, so to speak, and see what comes back. And then she got what was it, 50 people? You said
50 people wrote to her.
all right, 50 people. And then so then she began to say, what can we do? And they pool their resources and then they move forward from that. So what I tell people, principle four, the eight principles have to get my branding into,
It's
is
all good.
is principle five is work from the inside out. You
Mhm.
start from where you are and you work out in successive layers. It's a referral. It's like bringing,
Yeah.
growing. And that is so counter to what so many organizations do in fund development. They use what I call the buckshot approach. They just kind of blast it out there onto a
Yeah.
barn and see what sticks, as
Yeah.
opposed to building it in networks. And that
Yeah.
the focus on, and then so you're doing both the idea of helping people live with it, but also going ahead and furthering your understanding on how to mitigate the circumstances. Um, oh, I
Indeed.
like that.
I mean, one of the things that I've been asked, because to your point, I mean, this is, your audience is focused on fundraising and fund development and the like. And, organizations like ours struggle between the fundraising aspect and the mission aspect of it. Oftentimes those two are seen almost in tension to each other. And, my philosophical piece, which I said on day one, actually, as as a CEO, because we had an open town hall and someone asked the question that fundraising has been described as a necessary evil in order to do the work of organizations like ours, and I actually said no, that's not true. Fundraising is an essential part of what we do. We're a fundraising organization with a noble mission, and you need both parts to do the work. And to say that we exist to, our mission statement is we will cure MS while empowering people to live their best lives. That's an incredible statement, which I can rally around and say to the audience, this is why we need your support, because we need your support to be able to raise funds to cure people and ensure that those who have the disease today live powerfully and live well. And to do that, we need your support. And it I challenge the notion that fundraising and mission delivery have to be in competition with each other. They are not.
They're
They
one
are
and the
part.
same.
Exactly. One, you can't have one without the other. And Ms. Lowry, I think I didn't have the privilege of meeting her, but she led our organization for many, many years. And for her, it was always about, who she could engage in the movement to support the organization, however they were, whether they were donors, whether they were doctors, or they were senators to create legislation. It was about finding the people you need to deliver on your mission, but never losing sight that it's always about the mission. It was always about her brother Bernard. And they are not, to your point, they're interlocked. They're not either or.
Mm-hmm. Well, what we say here at the Eight Principles is that your donors are your investors, and
Yeah.
they're investing. But here's the key: they're investing in their own values and their own desires, which have some relationship to your mission, but may not be exactly aligned. But when you focus on the investor and you give them an experience, however you want to define that they can't purchase,
Hmm.
they will literally become, well, I like to say they'll throw money at you, and they almost do that because they want the experience and the
Hmm.
joy of being part of the solution.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
what they want. Um,
Exactly. One of the things I love to say when I'm out sort of telling the story of the MS Society is that, there's, as I said in my introduction, there's multiple treatments for the disease today. Some better than others because, science moves forward and the treatments of yesterday aren't necessarily as good as the treatments of today. Um, Three of those treatments were discovered by young scientists who we had invested in their career some years ago. And as a result of their insight, their research, we now have these treatments that have helped hundreds of thousands of people. Like, one of them was a $90,000 investment in the career development of a person. It's like, I mean, what donor would say that treatment over there came from my investment in this person? It's an amazing
mhm.
story. And it is, at the end of the day, it's not just about the money. It's about the impact. It's about the
Right.
changed lives. And to be able to say that today, a person could be diagnosed, in a few weeks. I want to get that down to a few hours, but a few weeks is so much better than what it was in Sylvia's day, which was years. And that's the progress that donors and the people that support us have empowered us to do. And I think, to your point, they go together.
Okay. Absolutely. I love the idea of of an investment going in a place that wasn't expected, that yields benefits that wasn't
Mhm.
expected, and that it's we like to say here it's people, not money.
Exactly. There's a Timism, or one of Tim's gems, as my staff like to call it, that oftentimes people will ask me, so why are you investing in training scientists? So fellowships, we got these fellowships to launch the career of young scientists. I was the recipient of one of those from the MS Society, and my response to that is just really simple, is that pe people discover cures. Cures don't discover themselves. You need people to make those discoveries and make those insights, and that's why we have to invest in talent, invest in the scientists, invest in the workforce we have today, both for the science but also the fundraising to make that science possible, because it's the people behind us that are going to discover
Hmm.
those cures. Not they don't discover themselves.
No, no, they don't. Um, what would you say right now is, I'd like a two-pronged answer here,
Hmm.
if you're willing to give me one, Tim,
Sure.
and that is, what would you consider to be, if not the most, certainly one of the top one or two challenges facing the MS
Hmm.
Society?
Yeah.
Is it, and then also what you think one of the top two challenges of the disease itself?
Sure. So I think one of our big challenges is obviously sustaining interest and motivation in solving the disease when you have 30 plus treatments for all the different facets of it. You find yourself in this place of like, well, haven't you guys kind of solved it already? And the answer is actually no, we haven't solved it. That's not that hasn't been solved. I'd also say part of the challenge we have is evolving and adapting, and I'd say it would be true for many nonprofit professionals, is the the demographics of our society are changing, right? By 2030, right, millennials and Gen Z, that those generational cohorts will be the dominant you know, individuals in many workforces, and they are the donors of our future. But as I think you and I have talked about before, they're also evolving and adapting, and it requires agility of organizations to be able to see and understand what is it that appeals to a millennial or appeals to Gen Z. And now that we have our first Gen Alphas in the work, in 10, 15 years, those Gen Alphas are going to be in the future. And I think that um, we 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 have, as nonprofit organizations, we have to work in a much more dynamic environment today in terms of what donors are interested in. And it requires for organizations like ours, and I think it would be true of any, nonprofit or fundraising organization, is you have a continuum of, the boomers and the greatest generation who are still with us and have significant capacity all the way down to the Gen
Yeah.
Alphas. That is a that's a tough it requires a lot of awareness and agility and ability to perhaps even start thinking about micro campaigns and the like. So those I think are two big structural challenges. For the disease, I'd say there are two aspects to it. One is we're reaching a point where increasingly we're on the cusp of being able to spot who is at risk of developing MS before they've had their first symptoms. A really important place, and imagine being able to do pre-screening to be able to
Hmm.
intervene in the disease before a person even has to show up to the doctor. So that's a big aspect when I talk about trying to get the diagnosis down to hours as opposed to weeks. That's often the
Yeah.
challenge, is some people don't even know what's going on in their body until they have a really tough symptom. So that's one big challenge. And the reason it's a challenge is you need lots of big data. You need scientists thinking in different ways. We don't have the tools we need to be able to spot the disease early enough. So we've got a lot of work to do in that standpoint. At the other part of the continuum, we also, while I celebrate, and I think your audience would say how incredible it is that we have lots of treatments that help manage the disease, slow it down, make life better for people, we also haven't cracked all of the code for how to treat MS. And there are people who will tell me, who will say, I haven't had to go to the neurologist for a new attack or anything for 5 years. I haven't seen anything on my brain scan for 10 years. But I also know that the person I was 10 years ago is not the person I am today. Something else is going on under the surface. I talk about it almost like an iceberg. We've been able to treat the parts of the iceberg we see. There's also parts of the MS iceberg we don't see today that we're raising money to solve that part of it. And so that's the next frontier. And I take it, I'm a very much a glass half full guy. I'd rather have 30 treatments that do something today as opposed to no treatments, and then start focusing my energy on the parts that we haven't solved yet. But I also don't want to lose sight of that very much. So those are the twin aspects. This is why I'm so energized in my job.
Okay. Let's talk about your intergenerational challenge when it comes to fundraising. All right.
Hmm.
Now, um, when you said that the primary generation will be a millennial in 2030, that's 5 years, Tim.
No, it's right around the corner.
It is. It is. And I remember when they were the people everyone liked to dump on, oh, these millennials, blah, 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 blah. And then the actual numbers came out.
Hmm.
Millennials are actually very philanthropic.
They are.
80 plus percentage of them give philanthropic gifts. But here's the challenge: they give in they test more than the boomers do, and certainly
Hmm.
the greatest generation do. They don't give institutionally; they test, and they are expecting something in return, but it's not a material thing. They don't want a
Right.
Chotsky or this or something
Yeah.
else. they they want, okay, what are you doing for the money that I gave you?
Yeah.
And then, as you know, nonprofits are notoriously poor communicators. They I saw the look on your face. For
Yeah.
those of us,
Yeah. No.
for those of you who are
Really?
listening only to the audio, we're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When you have statistics like a 40% renewal rate for first year donations, and you have about 40 to 50% of nonprofits who actually give you a thank you. I don't mean a tax receipt, I mean some other gratitude sort of
Hmm.
communication. Um, I'm amazed that people make gifts at all, quite frankly. But
Yeah.
it's a testament to the generosity of Americans. But they also don't have much. Millennials don't have much patience.
No.
No, if they reach out to you and you don't respond in a right way consistently, they move on.
And they have lots and lots of choice. That's the piece about today's world. I mean,
Yeah.
a theme that I constantly sort of emphasize is that no one owes us anything as a nonprofit organization. I mean, they give us the money. Yes, we are the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. We want to be here for everyone who's passionate and cares, but we have to earn trust and reason to give to the MS Society every single day. No one owes
Mm-hmm.
us anything. And I think any nonprofit, I'd say, right, would say, you're in this business for charity. The charity is actually not a two-way street. It's actually a one-way street because the person who's being charitable, it's their choice and they have agency. And in today's world, they have agency on a lot of options. And I think relevance, timeliness, trustworthiness, all of those, and of course, identity with the cause, is another
Right.
piece. And
Yeah.
you know, cause related marketing is challenging, for all those reasons. And you can't take people for granted. And I think all too often I think to me, again, philosophically, the death knell of any nonprofit organization is hubris. The minute you
Mm-hmm.
start having hubris about who you are and why you're here, and the need to demonstrate impact, the need to demonstrate why you are worthy of support
Yeah.
is key. And to your point, it's interesting. I had made a year-end donation to my alma mater, Houghton College, which and I got a handwritten thank you card, for that, which I was like, this is awesome. And what prompted me is like, what a nice touch. Actually, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it wasn't at a level that I expected it, but I was like, oh, this is great. It just happened to be kind of like, oh yeah, let me do that. It was a very kind of spontaneous thing, but it felt great to get a note
Mm-hmm.
card back for
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Well,
it's very analog, but it felt great.
I want to find out when you make a gift that's at a level when you get a phone call from the president. That's what I'm looking for.
Yes, I've made a few of those calls myself. So over the last few months, so I appreciate the importance of that. But it is, I think, coming back to millennials, because I happen to have two kids. They're both, one's a millennial, one's a Gen Z, one's an old, what I'd describe, one's an older millennial, and the other one's what I would describe, I guess, as an older Gen Z, sort of. And we're always talking about what motivates and interests them. And I notice that, and in that generation, they have, to your point, a lot of very specific interests, very charitable, big hearts, big
Mhm.
hearts, but also wanting relevance, authenticity, and to your point, stickiness is
Mhm.
much much harder today. I'd say every nonprofit organization needs to think through what is the stickiness of their message with the audiences, because stickiness is getting harder.
I love the term stickiness.
Yeah.
Now, um, you probably know this already, but the average first year renewal rate, meaning if I gave MS a
Mm,
gift this year
yeah.
for the first time, what is the likelihood I do it again next year? Well, I don't know what yours is, but overall, it's just under 40%.
Yeah.
Now,
We're in that range.
so let's put that in the case of a business. How many businesses do you know can survive when they lose 60% of their customers every single year? I
Yeah.
mean, think about that. I mean, when you put it that way, it's like, oh my goodness. But see, here's the problem. Most nonprofits, and I would say well over 70% or more, they don't see their donors as their customers,
Hmm.
as their investors. They see the people they serve as their customers. And I prefer to say those are the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
They benefit, but they're not the investors. They're not the ones that are putting the money into this, and they're your customers. And that you
Yeah.
also know that if you can maintain a relationship with a customer over time, guess what? They tend to spend more. They tend to make bigger gifts. And
Indeed.
as you also know, it's much easier to keep a customer or keep a donor than it is to find a new one.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah.
yet, Tim, and yet, I can't tell you how many nonprofit executives their focus is all on getting new people in the door.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
And I think the sustaining and retaining, those are definitely the areas that, to your point, I think our sector, struggles with. And, as a mature organization, we have a lot of donors, but we also have a lot of lapsed donors who,
mhm.
come in, and retention is, I think, particularly in the younger generations, one of those areas that, you know, you need to really, really be attentive to. And also, I think, understand what works and fits with each of them.
Yeah.
Because, it's interesting. I was talking to my son the other day about, you know, I was like, I followed stuff on Facebook. I'm like, wait, you're a 20 X-year old and you're still on Facebook? I thought that was the land for the oldsters like myself. And he's like, oh
The
no, I still say
grandkids.
I still follow it because I want. And what was interesting, it was striking what he said is, well, that's where I go to follow what everybody else is in the family is doing. And I like, oh, and so the light bulb moment for me is so often we talk about these generations as sort of pigeonholing them. Well, they're just the
Mhm.
Instagram generation, when in point of fact, they're much more diverse than I think we give them credit for.
Mhm.
And when organizations again adopt sort of these very mono focused worldviews, I think that ends up actually hurting us because, that generation is not just the Instagram generation. They're the
No.
WhatsApp, the Discord, Snapchat, et cetera, et cetera. And we have to be agile enough to find ourselves in all those spaces and be okay with that.
Well, principle six of the eight principles, Tim, is divide and grow. And
Hmm.
what the way I put that in a short sentence is treat different donors differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not
There's,
all, and respond to their particular. And even if we're not talking about generational differences, let's look at life history differences.
hmm.
The interest of a 20-year-old and the focus of a 20-year-old is far different than someone who's our age, you see.
Agreed.
And where we have my children are grown in a way, but you have children that are, you have someone at home still.
I have one at home still, but
Okay.
out
All
of
right.
college, but living at home and
Okay.
doing okay.
Oh, he's one of
Gainfully
those,
employed,
right?
gainful. Let me hasten to add, gainfully employed. So that's all
So
good.
so he's not living in your basement. All right, I got
No,
it.
no, no, no. No, definitely not. Very, very, no, very, very successful. So it's all good.
let, let me shift the subject here a little bit. You and I share something very important, and that is we're both followers of Jesus. And you went to a Christian college. I did not. But my faith influences so much of what I do in the way I look at the world. How
Yeah.
has that been for you?
Same, same. It's an important part. I just transparency. My dad was a pastor and missionaries, and I've lived in other parts of the world because of the faith journey. My great grandparents, not my great grandparents, my grandparents started a theological seminary in what is now Zimbabwe. It's still going to this day, 60 years later. So it's an important aspect, and I think one of the aspects of faith that comes through is the fact that generosity is a part of a faith journey,
Yes, it
and that
is.
the importance. I think for me, one of the things that animates me is the fact that, the almost I'll call it the duty to care that comes with a faith journey, and the fact that, there is, though societies are judged by how we approach the weakest of us,
Hmm.
and those who are in greatest need. And I think that's been a critical dimension of how I'm wired as a leader. It's always about it's always about other people. It's not about
Hmm.
me. It's always about others. It's about ensuring that the society we leave is better because of that. And so, it's an important aspect of who I am as a leader, uh, and it's been an important facet of my leadership journey.
Well, as Christians, we were told that it's better to give than to receive. And
Hmm.
I can speak to that. I mean, the donor or the investor, they get real joy if they're motivated to do
Hmm.
this.
Yeah.
Um, they get something that's very valuable, though intangible.
Hmm.
Um, and that is something that unfortunately so many nonprofits don't really understand or appreciate. Their focus is totally on meeting their budgetary requirements or some sort of a project they're involved in or whatever it is, and they see it simply as monetary.
Hmm.
And they don't give the donor, the investor, the joy, the
Yeah.
joy. That's what they get out of this, you see.
Hmm.
And I don't think I have to say this to you, but there have been plenty of nonprofit executives that I morally have to say, you need to get over yourself. All right. You really need to get over yourself.
Yeah, no, that's totally not how I'm wired. I remember listening to, I can't recall who the author is, but he shared a story about, he and his wife had been, he was a commencement speaker at, I can't remember what the university was, but he had been invited to come to a special ceremony, a private sort of meeting with the president and a few key leaders, and some students had been invited along with their families to come to the event. And what happened there was, there were all students who had committed to do some sort of service related thing in other parts of the world, sacrificing career opportunities to go do this certain thing. And this wasn't an inexpensive college. So of course these were students who had debt and the like. And prior to graduation, some some anonymous donor basically wiped out their their debts that they could get on and do service like that. And it was an alumnus of the university. And what was striking was the how he described just the unexpected, the tears, the joy that these individuals felt. And again, it was a private setting, so it wasn't done in
Mhm.
let's celebrate these students. It was is much more sort of behind the scenes. And I carry that story because I say, for that donor, I imagine it was about, they had been supremely successful, and then they were able to give it forward, and the joy that that person must have felt knowing and hearing the transformative effect their generosity had on these people, who then, who knows what they would go on to do in life.
Mhm.
And I think about that, paying it forward kind of mindset in terms of what it means. And it was really, it reminded me that, when you make connections, when you create opportunity, and then there are these individuals who sometimes they do want their name on the building, and other times they don't want their name on the building. What matters more is what how they change lives,
Mhm.
how they transform society and culture. And I think the responsibility I think we have as nonprofits is to figure out, well, what is the thing that works for
Mhm.
those individuals, and to create the space, and to not make it about ourselves.
Not make it about
It's,
yourself for sure.
it's just
Um,
it's making it about myself is anathema to me, as my staff, my executive leadership team knows quite well.
well, good. I was thinking of something that happened to me several years ago when I was still in institutional work, and I was serving as a development director of an engineering school, assistant dean. And I was working with a gentleman who was a Detroit automotive executive, Um, if you know anything about the old automotive world, it was a rough and tumble world. It wasn't for
Yes.
sissies. All right, uh, and I and he had given a gift that would endow, I think, 4 scholarships, 4-year scholarships.
Mm,
Significant gift, very significant, and there were the selection criteria were pretty straightforward. And then I remember going to Detroit and sitting in his office and showing him the individuals that had been selected for this gift. And here is a man who, you know I mean, bossing all kinds of people around, and where is this and where is that and blah blah blah. He sat there at his desk and leafed through this notebook that I gave him. Tears came to his eyes, Tim,
hmm
and
Yeah.
he said, I take this home and show this to Susan, who I think was his wife? And I said, certainly, you can do that. And then later, when he came to campus, we had a luncheon for those students that were the recipients. I mean,
hmm
I think he enjoyed that more than just about anything else I'd ever seen. And you'll find this interesting. These are young engineering students,
hmm
and they got a chance to meet with a top Detroit executive, and they're sitting there at lunch. And one of them pipes up and says, and he calls the man's name, and he says, "How do you get to be CEO?" And here's what this gentleman said to him: "You do one job at a time and do the very best job you can, and then the next job comes along." And I thought to myself, in fact, I said to the alumnus later, I hope he understood the wisdom of how you answered him today, because
It's
he,
fabulous advice. I've only been CEO 6 months, but I would say that is absolutely true. You know, do the
Mhm,
job, and even before I was in this role, it was counsel I gave to people as, they knew that I moved up and have had multiple sort of, seeing more and more senior level roles is do your best work in the role you are today, and the opportunities will present themselves. And don't strive for the next thing. It's about excel where you are, and opportunities present themselves. And when
mhm.
they present them, but the key is when they present themselves, you also have to be willing to take a risk and try the new thing. Because oftentimes,
Yes,
this is one of the leadership, counsel I give is that you have to you have to stretch beyond your zone sometimes. And if you're not willing to do that, it will be hard to move to those, higher and more wider levels of authority, because you have to learn, but you also have to you have to be willing to risk as well.
yes. Well, and I would think that's especially a situation when you're maybe moving from a what I would call corporate track to an
Mhm.
entrepreneurial track, uh,
Completely.
where maybe you even had to take a pay cut to do what you had to do, but you have a bigger goal in mind that you're looking for. Um,
Absolutely.
well, I mean, when
Absolutely.
I was in corporate life, as you know, for several
hmm
years, engineer, and then I got into fundraising, um, and I had to take a pay cut, but it's something I really wanted to do, and I've never
hmm
looked back.
Yeah.
Um, and I've more than compensated for the temporary pay cut, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So,
No,
um,
life is full of twists and turns. There's no straight line when it comes to careers. And I do, to your point, being willing to take a pay cut so that you can have more opportunity later makes sense. I've been encouraging different leaders that I'm in proximity to, is that, everybody's on a leadership journey. The key point is to make it your leadership journey. Don't
mhm,
try to be the Tim Coetzee leadership journey or the Larry Johnson leadership journey. You need to be on your leadership journey. What is it? Learn from people. Absolutely. Learn from people, learn and grow. Don't compare yourself, but take, you know, gain wisdom and counsel from others who've walked that way. And then, make it your own and take risk. You got to be willing to take risk. If you're not willing to take risk, you can be comfortable, but you also may be not realizing your full potential.
mhm,
And that's the part that frustrates me sometimes, to see a leader who has full potential and their leader's not, they're not realizing it.
mhm. Let's talk about the disease itself for a minute or
hmm
two.
Sure.
You've made several references to the fact that back when the society was formed, diagnosis could be a year, 2 years.
Hmm.
What was the process of the diagnosis? What were they just looking for behavior?
Yeah. So typically, the way the disease shows up is somebody, say they go to bed, they wake up the next morning, they can't see out of one eye. And that's sort of like, that's highly unusual. Or they might have
Mhm.
trouble walking. Their leg starts, they start dragging their leg in some manner, or they start getting a lot of tingling and pain and kinds of things like that. And those are symptoms that something's off in the brain that are manifesting themselves in that way. And before in the day of Sylvia Lowry, we didn't have things like MRI machines where you could get an MRI and see if there was something wrong with the brain. And in point of fact, we didn't even use MRI for diagnosing MS until the late 1990s because the technology was just not there. And so the reason it would take a long time is there's a lot of things if we use the can't see out of one eye uh, situation that could cause that. It could be that you've got an inflamed eye. Okay, that's
Mhm.
one thing. It could be that the nerve that connects your eye to the brain is itself inflamed, but have nothing to do with MS, and that viruses will cause that from time to time. The dragging of your foot could be caused by a torn nerve or a pulled nerve or a variety of different things. So.
Or like what happened to me over the weekend, falling from skiing. And it's like,
Exactly. There's lots of different things that could cause, humans are complex, so it could cause that. So part of the challenge of multiple sclerosis is ruling out other things that could be
yeah.
that you don't want to tell somebody you got multiple sclerosis when they don't have multiple sclerosis. But the advent of MRI and the ability to put somebody in a machine, scan their brain, see if there's damage to the brain that's very specific to MS, has
Hmm.
enabled us now to move from in. So I'll give you a statistics in 2001 when we published, the first sort of the sort of next edition of the How to Diagnose MS. The average time from first symptom to diagnosis could anywhere between 5 to 10 years, long
Hmm.
time. Today, anywhere between 3 and 6 months. So really, and
Okay.
it is because you can both look at the symptoms, but also now have an MRI and rule things out. So that was the big difference. Um, back in those days, back in our founders' days, it was a very doom and gloom scenario.
Hmm.
And they would doctors would say to the husbands of wives, let's not tell her because yeah, there's nothing we can do for MS. They would say to men the same thing, and it was just unfortunately the world has changed profoundly.
Hmm.
uh, we still have some imbalances. People are being taking too long to be being diagnosed because doctors aren't seeing and spotting the symptoms. Part of my work with our team is to help more and more doctors know what you should be looking for
Yeah.
and to get somebody to a neurologist, get them diagnosed really urgently. That's on the diagnosis side. Obviously on the other side, the the things that we're trying to do is we want people to be diagnosed quickly. We also want them to start a treatment quickly because we know that if you start treatment today, you'll have an effect on the disease today, absolutely. But I'm also thinking about 20 years from now. The data tells us that if you start a treatment today, yourself 20 years from now will thank you a lot because you've preserved brain, you've preserved function, and the longer you can do that, the more you can stay employed, the more you can continue to contribute to society, and just have overall a better outcome. And so
Hmm.
we want people to start, get a doctor, get diagnosed, start a treatment early, and then get on with life, and do things like exercise, take care of wellness, well-being, all of these things, which again are, I describe them as deposits into your 401k that
Yes.
accrue to your benefit. Your older self will thank you because we're all getting older. I mean, that's one of the aspects of MS is that as we get older, we're getting older. So your brain doesn't work as quickly, your body doesn't work as quickly.
Oh,
So, I know it's like,
yeah.
it's not the same.
It's like,
I'm not the same me as I was when I was 40. Um,
well, neither am I. And more and more, I mean, sometimes I'll go to say, no, not the, oh, now what's that word I'm looking for? you know.
The
And
names are what are killing me right now.
well, names too. I've never been good at names, remembering them, that is, and except, but yeah. Now I'm looking behind you,
Hmm.
and of course, I think I know the answer to this, but I'd like you to share with our audience. There's a photograph of a young man standing there in a sort of a soldier stance.
Hmm.
Um, Looks like a period photograph from the look of it. And now, who is that, Tim?
So that is a painting of my father.
Hmm.
So Victor Kutsi, he had was born in what was then Rhodesia, now today is known as Zimbabwe. And the picture of him is, I think he was in his early 30s. He might have been in his 20s. And he was at the farm that my grandfather owned and managed in the middle part of the country. And so that there was an old photo that someone had of him like that. And so someone in his congregation, as I mentioned earlier, he was a minister, and so someone in one of the congregations was a painter and decided to do this painting. And my brother took a picture of it and shared
Mm,
it with me. And it's a very sentimental picture, so I keep it there just as a reminder of my dad
okay. All
and
right.
the journey and everything he gave to me.
Well, that explains why it is in more of a photographic format, but it
Yeah.
is a painting, the
It is
original.
it is a painting. It's a very unique kind of thing, and he had a huge influence on my life, and so I keep it there. And then on the other side, you know, pictures of my two kids, Mitchell and
Hmm.
Cameron. So I
Well, of
keep close to me
course.
as well.
And
Yeah,
then behind you, you have to move your head a little bit.
yeah, yeah.
There's that sort of purple
Hmm.
abstract.
Yeah.
Tell us the story behind that.
Yeah, so it's it does look a little abstract. It's actually from a picture in a microscope. So one of the things about multiple sclerosis is there are nerve cells that conduct information from our brain. Those nerve cells are covered by an insulation that almost serves like electrical insulation and ensures the nerve cells um, do their work. That insulation is put around the nerve cells by other cells called oligodendrocytes, and they kind of look star shaped. That's why they look so funky. And when I was finishing up my graduate work, I had started to think about where do I want to what scientific career I want to pursue. At the time, I was studying mRNA before anybody knew what or cared what mRNA was, but I was
Okay.
studying back then. And today, everybody knows what mRNA is. But I was interested in moving to brain research, and I saw that picture of the oligodendrocyte on the cover of a scientific journal that I was in the library one morning. I thought, wow, that's really neat. That's an interesting, cell. What's that about? So I read the article, and it started me thinking about, oh, maybe I could pursue research in that area. And so I actually went to a laboratory in North Carolina to study those
Oh,
oligodendrocytes, those cells. That picture, ironically, was not the lab that I went to work in, but after finishing my fellowship, I then went to the University of North Carolina of Connecticut Health Science Center in Farmington and worked with Dr. Steve Pfeiffer, whose lab actually took that photo and published it as part of a review they had written. So it's one of those, I came to the MS field as I describe myself as an accidental tourist. I was interested in the science.
mhm.
Many of our research community are people like me who are interested in the science. Others do it because they have a family or a personal connection to the disease. But now I have a lot of deeper personal connections. But it's also I tell the story when I share it. Sometimes people ask me how I got interested. It's that part of the power of the scientific enterprise that we have in the United States and actually around the world, where you have strong biomedical research, is
Yes.
that you have opportunities for people to come in and grow and develop and learn new things. And science is very much about moments of inspiration. That was one moment of inspiration in my career that got me on this career path. Didn't think that I'd be sitting here talking to you as the CEO of the National MS Societies 30 plus years later, but that's the journey is the joy is in the journey itself.
Yes. I've heard it said, I think it was Agatha Christie of all people that said this. She said, life is what happens while you're making your plans.
That's a great that is a great quote. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's been I've been incredibly fortunate. One of the things about being in the MS community is that, when I started as a researcher in the MS community, that was in July of 1993, right at the same time when we had our first drug approved for multiple sclerosis. Up to that point, there hadn't been any. I happened to start right, I'm reading in the Times, oh, first drug approved, big deal. And now to see, 31 years later, or almost 32 years later, how the disease, the diagnosis, the management of it has been transformed so profoundly, is one just incredible, to see from a scientific and a healthcare point of view. The role we've been able to play as a National MS Society in that is incredible. The role that U.S. taxpayers have played in funding so much of that research, the amount of innovation behind it is incredible. And, it gives me a lot of hope and optimism that, being able to solve Sylvia Lyre's original ask, will anyone recovered from this disease contact me? I actually see that we are on the cusp of that. We're closer, we can see, the horizon about, getting that, who's at risk of the disease. If we can solve that, then we turn our attention to ensuring that those who live with the disease today, uh, live well and live powerfully, and we can perhaps have that prevention from there ever being anybody hearing those words, "You have MS again." And I think that, it's a testament to the community, collective, all of our donors, the scientists. It's no one part of the ecosystem. It's the collective,
Hmm.
which makes it so inspiring to do our work.
You said something that really struck out at me. Talked about all the sources of your revenue, and then you said U.S. taxpayers.
Hmm.
Now, you didn't say the government. You said U.S. taxpayers. So you've individualized it. These are
Hmm.
people who who have given through tax
Hmm.
levies their own
Yeah.
individual funds. And that's what I like to tell people. Of course, we know that the bulk of philanthropic money comes from individuals in one shape or another.
Hmm.
It's almost 90%. And so that's either living individuals
Hmm.
through or people through bequests or through donor advised funds or through family foundations.
All
Um,
of those.
all of those. And so the portions that come either from organized independent foundations or corporate work is a very small piece. It's only about 10%
Yeah.
altogether. Um,
Exactly. And I'll just hasten to add, we don't ourselves receive any funding from the federal government or state governments for that matter. We Why I reference that is, I've had the opportunity to see how the work of the National Institutes of Health and others support incredible research from around the world. The healthcare that I think we benefit from has benefited from many innovations and discovery. As a as a former scientist, I know how important it is that we continue to sustain a medical and research enterprise that discovers things that enable, rapid testing for this, that, or the other thing, the development of MRIs, you name it. You need a robust enterprise to do that. You need organizations like ours to be part of that ecosystem, but you also need, right? It's the collective good that lets us, have the healthcare we have today. And so it's important. It's an important part of the ecosystem, but not the only important part. But I've had an opportunity to see some of the things that, we enable as U.S. citizens, and it is remarkable, I would say. And
yeah.
and some of those, and again, things that we may not see today, but in 20 years, people will take for granted about healthcare. And the healthcare
Okay.
we have today, I often point out, benefits from the innovations that were discovered 20, 30, 40 years ago. And my desire is that we can get those innovations out to people faster. Which is,
Absolutely.
always hard, right? Science takes longer than you can. And the thing about science and medical research, it is a constant. You're learning along the way. You fail 10 times and get that one discovery, and they're like, okay, that's the thing. And
Hmm.
that's just part of, every failure leads to new learning, is how I describe it. And that's what we need to keep doing. And I think what I see our role as nonprofit organizations and us as a medically oriented one is to ensure that people see the big picture, that, we need to try multiple things. If we try five things, four of them don't work. Well, we now know four things don't work. We have one that does. Now let's find the next five. And that's a little of the Thomas Edison type of mindset, but you have to have that because my view, the minute you think you have a sure thing, you don't have a sure thing because there are no sure things.
No,
I've learned the
no.
hard way there are no sure things when it comes to medical research.
And it's
Uh,
never linear.
oh God, no! I will say for my own scientific career, nothing was linear. It was not linear. I mean, made some really interesting discoveries, but oftentimes those were like when you weren't expecting them, and that's just part of
Hmm.
life. So
Right.
awesome.
The one product that raised it's not medical, but it comes into my mind, the Post-it note. That was something that came out of 3M that was totally unexpected. Oh, look at this, you know. So in one perspective, it was a failure, and another a wild success.
Absolutely. I love that story. Professor Amy Edmondson, just wrote about it a bit in some of her books, and um, it's a remarkable story of people and people thinking and just also relationships. And the other aspect of it, I think, as leaders that I often talk about is the importance of having what I call a lateral vision, lateral thinking. Oftentimes we get locked in to what's immediately in front of us,
Hmm.
which again is
Yes,
important, but you really need, and I think it becomes critical as you start moving into more and more leadership within organizations to have to be looking on what's on the left and right
yes,
of what you're
yes,
looking at, because you could be missing some really important things on the left and right. And it's often hard for leaders to not to look at that. I work with an executive coach who said, you sometimes need to be able to rise up and look down and
yes.
see the whole board, the whole chessboard. And I think that's an apt way to describe it.
Okay. One final question that I want you to
Sure.
address. You're a newly minted CEO, 6 months, correct?
Hmm.
I want you to respond to some advice I was given a number of years ago when I was still moving up, so to speak. One
Hmm.
of the perks of my work as a fund development officer, especially when I'm working with people of higher net worth or of accomplishment, is I get a chance to be around really successful people. And when I say successful, I don't just mean financially successful.
Hmm.
I mean from a leadership point of view, innovation, everything. You see, and here's something that one person said to me. Actually, it was more than one person. I just been given my first vice presidency at a college, and this particular program needed a lot of help. Um, and he said to me, Larry, you've got about 6 months. And I said, what
Hmm.
do you mean? And I'll call him Bill, but that wasn't his name. He said, you can do pretty much whatever the hell you want to do for about 6 months, and people just write it off. But after 6 months, he said, the cement starts to set. So if you want
Hmm.
to make change, you've got to make it early and dramatic. So
Hmm.
how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think so. I've made my share of changes in the first 6 months. I have a few more changes to do because I came into a situation where we're in a bit of a rebuilding phase, and so I think that's going to require. I guess I would put it as that the cement sets on floor one, and then you've got to go to floor two, and then the
Okay.
cement sets on floor two, and then you're gonna, I almost look at like a multi-story building, and
All
so
right.
it does cement, but it doesn't get fixed, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I'm looking, okay, what do I do for the next 6 months? And then it's the next 6 months. And, as particularly in the circumstances I'm in terms of some rebuilding and regrowing, you know, I, and he's right. I mean, part of it is an element of that. I will say also, leadership of today, as you're leading workforces of today, um, I think require and demand that the CEOs and our senior leaders have agility in being able to move and flow with a more dynamic type workforce, a more dynamic external environment. Some of the challenges are the same, but some of the
Hmm.
challenges are also new. And
Yeah.
I'd offer a perspective on that. Maybe if you have me back a year from now, I can offer a 1.5 year perspective
Well, you're
on it.
on, Tim. You're on. Okay.
So it's a I mean, for me, I'm a learning leader, so part of my journey is to learn from other leaders. I'm incredibly fortunate to have a great board that is very supportive and working with me, as I've never been CEO before, so working with me. But what 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 I also love is that, I've got, an incredible team of people. We're all
Hmm.
committed, and we have about 700 staff in the organization, all deeply committed to the work we're doing. And so for me, I also view it as a privilege to be in this role, an incredible privilege to have the opportunity to follow in Ms. Lowry's footsteps.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to add, Tim?
Just thank you for the opportunity to be with your community. I'd offer your community to keep doing the great work that each of you are doing and be inspired, and we can change the world.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
You
This has been
know,
awesome.
yeah, it has. Well, we've been really kind of exploring all kinds of things in the past hour or so, and I've just been thoroughly blessed about it. And I know our audience has been too. Next week, I think there'll be somebody else different, just as entertaining or and just as informative. So thank you all for tuning in.